Welcome back to BookCast. Today we are unpacking every layer of the incredible novel, The Expedition of Humphry Clinker.
That's right.
Get ready for a deep dive into its characters, themes, and the hidden meanings behind the story. This isn't just a book, it's a sprawling journey across 18th century Britain, told through a series of vivid, often hilarious letters, all designed to give us a shortcut to being well-informed about a literary masterpiece. We're going to trace the novel's unique structure, follow a truly unforgettable family and their eccentric encounters, and unravel a series of surprising revelations that keep you hooked until the very end.
It's an absolute pleasure to delve into Tobias Smollett's final, and arguably his most cherished, work. What's truly fascinating here is how the Expedition of Humphry Clinker stands as a testament to an author reaching a point of artistic maturity, even while retaining the razor-sharp wit and keen observational humor he was renowned for.
Yeah, that wit is definitely there.
Oh, absolutely. As we embark on this deep dive, we'll see how this journey, unfolded entirely through letters, not only tells a captivating story, but also offers an invaluable window into the social fabric, the customs, and even the evolving medical theories of the time.
Right.
It's a novel that truly captures a moment in history through the eyes of its idiosyncratic characters.
That's the perfect framing, because to truly appreciate Humphry Clinker, we absolutely need to set the stage by understanding the man himself, Tobias Smollett.
Definitely. His context is key.
His life, filled with both privilege and hardship, profoundly influenced his writing, and this novel, in particular, showcases a remarkable evolution in his style. So let's unpack this. Who exactly was Tobias Smollett, and what did his literary landscape look like before he penned this masterpiece?
Okay, so Tobias Smollett's beginnings weren't entirely humble, though they certainly set the stage for a life marked by a certain dependency and, crucially, a keen, often critical eye on the world around him. He was born into a family of some means, the fourth son of Sir James Smollett of Bon Hill. However, misfortune struck early. His father, who had married a lady of no fortune, died soon after Tobias's birth, leaving the family reliant on his grandfather.
Ah, okay. So dependent from early on.
Pretty much. And when his grandfather also passed away without making much provision, young Smollett, having just completed his apprenticeship as a surgeon, moved to London to seek his fortune. It was a precarious start for a man of his intellect and ambition.
So a somewhat challenging entree into the world despite the family name. And he had a rather infamous stint in the sea service, didn't he? I remember reading that the source tells us he was thoroughly disgusted by it. What exactly happened there?
Indeed, his experiences at sea were so vividly and, frankly, disgustingly portrayed in his first major novel, The Life and Adventures of Roderick Random, published in 1748.
Right, Roderick Random.
He certainly didn't hold back, detailing the brutal, unhygienic, and often cruel life on a man-of-war that's a large, armed naval ship, which he quickly abandoned despite the promise of promotion.
He just couldn't stomach it.
Not at all. His visceral revulsion for the sea service is so palpable in Roderick Random that it almost makes you appreciate the dramatic improvements in naval accommodation and health that have thankfully occurred since the 18th century.
Yeah, it gives you perspective.
Definitely. After leaving the Navy, he spent some time in Jamaica, where he married a woman named Anne Lascelles, and by 1745, he had firmly established himself as a writer by profession.
And his personal temperament? The source describes him as having a querulous disposition and a tendency to make enemies. It sounds like he wasn't afraid to stir the pot, even using sharp satire against fathers like theater managers. How much did this define his public and literary persona?
You've hit on a core aspect of his character. He was notorious for his sharp tongue and even sharper pen. His satirical epistles, for instance, were said to possess the strength and also the coarseness of Churchill, a contemporary poet known for his biting verse. These were certainly well calculated to raise him enemies. And he courted controversy. He didn't shy away from criticism, often delivering it with a scathing, almost aggressive edge.
So, quite combative.
Very much so. This inherent combativeness, this readiness to find fault and lampoon folly, is a thread running through much of his earlier work, reflecting a profound dissatisfaction with the world as he perceived it.
Which brings us directly to those earlier novels, starting with Roderick Random in 1748. It sounds like it was quite the hit, despite some significant flaws, setting a pattern for his early career.
Absolutely. Roderick Random was undeniably popular, described as replete with humor and character, universally read, and remaining a favorite even with its grossness, vulgarity, and licentious morals.
So people loved it, warts and all.
Pretty much, yeah. It's notable for a deeply poignant deathbed scene of the grandfather, which many scholars believe to be autobiographical, drawing directly from Smollett's own early life experiences.
Ah, interesting.
A particularly significant character from this novel is Tom Bowling, the hero's uncle. He's portrayed as a brave, blunt, generous, enthusiastically fond of his profession, and critically, he served as the original of most sailor characters which have been since exhibited in English literature.
So he kind of created that archetype.
In many ways, yes. You also have colorful figures like Strap the Barber and Captain Whiffle, both said to be based on real people. The novel even provides a fascinating glimpse into 18th century travel conditions, with Roderick Random coming to London with pack horses, as stagecoaches weren't yet common for long journeys.
Right, travel was very different then.
Completely. The hero, despite his often questionable moral qualities, ultimately finds a beautiful wife and a good estate, a rather conventional novelistic trope for the period, even if the journey to get there was anything but.
So already a potent mix of crude humor, sharp observation, and a certain moral ambiguity. Then came Peregrine Pickle in 1750, which the source calls even more faulty in terms of indecency and moral transgressions. How did Smollett push the boundaries further here?
Yes, Peregrine Pickle really leaned into and, arguably, exacerbated the moral transgressions of its predecessor. While it still featured humorous sailor characters, even they were generally deemed inferior to his first sketch of Tom Bowling.
Not as good as Tom Bowling, huh?
Apparently not. Commodore Trunnion, for example, is described as so rough and bearish as scarcely to be like anything human. Smollett's Caliban, a monstrous, unrefined figure.
Wow.
Peregrine himself is a deeply unlikable protagonist. Proud, disagreeable, ungrateful, vicious. What's also notable is how this work included critical remarks on France, tinged with a distinct prejudice that Smollett would unfortunately carry into his later nonfiction travels.
That prejudice seemed quite strong in him.
It certainly comes across that way.
And within Peregrine Pickle, there's a rather sensational and controversial inclusion, the memoirs of a lady of pleasure, Lady Vane. That must have caused quite a stir.
It absolutely did. This was a standalone narrative, a kind of novella, inserted directly into Peregrine Pickle, and it was quite astonishing for its time, depicting a life of pleasure without compunction or moral remorse.
Without compunction. Yeah, that's bold for the era.
Extremely. This particular edition truly highlights the indecency the source refers to and underscored the daring, even shocking nature of Smollett's early work. It suggested that Smollett might have been reacting to criticisms that his previous novels lacked poetical justice, meaning that bad deeds weren't adequately punished.
Ah, so maybe a response to critics.
Possibly, because in his very next work, Count Fathom, he makes a conscious and significant departure.
Ah, so a villain is a hero this time, but with a different moral compass, perhaps.
Precisely. Count Fathom features a vicious character as the hero, but with a crucial twist. He is detected and punished.
Okay, so consequences this time.
Right. This was a clear attempt to address the perceived moral shortcomings of his earlier works, aiming for a sense of justice, often absent before. However, the narration itself wasn't considered entirely pleasing because, as the source notes, knavery is not dignified enough to interest us by its fall.
Interesting point.
He also included more serious characters and tried his hand at scenes of tenderness and exalted feeling in this novel, showing an author grappling with the moral dimensions of his art.
And he didn't stop there. He wrote The Adventures of Sir Lancelot Greaves, which sounds like a bit of a misstep, and dabbled in other genres too.
It was indeed considered a flat performance, an imitation of Don Quixote, but lacking the spark of its inspiration.
Not quite Cervantes.
Not quite. Beyond novels, he wrote a comprehensive history of England in a farce called The Reprisals, which the famous actor David Garrick staged, symbolizing a burying of old animosities between them.
Oh, so they made up.
Apparently so, at least professionally. Smollett's ventures into the political sphere, particularly his role in writing The Briton in defense of the controversial Earl of Bute, further highlighted his combative temperament.
Right, he wasn't suited for politics, you said.
Well, this sparked a famous rivalry with John Wilkes's influential political journal, North Briton, marking the end of their literary friendship. Even his travels from 1766, while entertaining, were full of spleen and illiberal prejudices against foreigners, partly due to his admittedly limited French language skills.
So that prejudice popped up again.
It did. In general, his works from this period were pervasive with coarseness and vicious manners, almost to the point where vice cannot be said to be seductive. For an air of misanthropy pervades all his compositions, meaning his cynicism was so strong it actually made vice unappealing.
So we have this portrait of a prolific writer, but one often characterized by sharp, misanthropic, and at times overtly coarse portrayals of humanity. This makes the Expedition of Humphrey Clinker all the more intriguing because it's described as a new chapter for him, a significant evolution.
Absolutely. This is the crucial turning point in Smollett's career. The source states that Humphrey Clinker was written when the author's mind was mellowed by age and cultured society had somewhat softened the coarseness of his painting without destroying his vein of humor.
Mellowed by age, I like that.
It's a great description. This is a monumental distinction. It's presented as the only one of his productions in this line which has not a vicious tendency.
The only one. That's significant.
Hugely. While it's noted that the moral sense is not offended in it, the same cannot always be said for all the other senses, implying that some of the physical descriptions might still be a bit robust or earthy, but certainly not morally corrupting like his earlier works.
Still some grit, but not morally questionable.
Precisely. This marks a profound shift in his outlook, a softening of that pervasive misanthropy.
And the format is quite unique for him too, isn't it? Very little of plot carried on in letters. That's called an epistolary format, correct?
Yeah, precisely. The novel unfolds entirely through a series of letters exchanged between the main characters. This epistolary format, meaning the entire story is told through correspondence, is a significant departure for him and truly allowed Smollett to showcase his mastery of voice and characterization.
You really hear the different personalities.
Absolutely. The style of the different personages, meaning each character, is admirably kept up during the whole work, with each being appropriate to their personality and background. This means each character's letters reflect their education, their social standing, and their unique way of seeing the world, providing distinct and often wildly contrasting perspectives on the very same events.
It sounds like a real technical achievement.
It really is. It's a marvel of literary craftsmanship.
And for a writer so known for his sailors, a type of character he essentially popularized, this novel has a surprising absence.
Yes, that's a truly key observation and a curious detail. Humphrey Clinker is the only one of the author's pieces that has no sailor in it.
No sailors at all.
None. The source even calls it a greater curiosity for that reason, likening it to connoisseurs valuing a Wouverman without a horse, referring to Philips Wouwerman, a Dutch Golden Age painter famous for including horses in almost all his works.
That's a great analogy.
It really shows a broadened scope and a willingness to explore different aspects of British society, moving beyond his established popular archetypes to tell a different kind of story.
Fantastic. So we have an author, Tobias Smollett, with a rich history of biting satire, vivid, if coarse characters, and a knack for sharp social observation, now approaching a new, more mellow phase in his writing. Let's get right into the story of the Expedition of Humphrey Clinker. Our journey begins with the initial family dynamics and early incidents as they travel through Gloucester and Bristol.
Okay.
The novel kicks off with letters dated April 2nd, and right away we meet the central figure, Matthew Bramble. What's our first impression of him through his own words?
Matthew Bramble immediately sets the tone with a litany of complaints in his letter to his trusted Dr. Lewis. He grumbles that his pills are good for nothing, expresses his perpetual torture by gout, and bemoans the plagues of his sister's children who, in his view, constantly vex him.
Sounds like a real curmudgeon.
He certainly starts that way. He reveals that a ridiculous incident involving his niece, Liddy, in Gloucester, has disordered him, hinting at trouble already brewing. But here's the crucial insight. Even amidst his grumbling and self-pity, we get a clear hint of his benevolent side.
The contradiction.
Exactly. He thoughtfully instructs Dr. Lewis to sell corn cheaply to the poor in his absence and to give an alternate cow to Morgan's widow. This is our first glimpse into the complex, often contradictory nature of Matthew. He's a curmudgeon on the surface, yes, but underneath, he clearly possesses a deep heart of gold. He's heading to Bristol hot, well, desperately hoping for some relief from his ailments.
And then we hear from Tabitha Bramble, Matthew's sister, whose character really shines through her very particular instructions to her housekeeper, Mrs. Gwilym. What do we learn about her from these meticulous details?
Oh, her letter is a masterclass in revealing character through seemingly mundane yet incredibly specific detail. Tabitha's vanity, her meticulous nature, and her concern for appearances are immediately evident as she lists her extensive wardrobe for Bristol. Her rose-colored negligee with green robins, her yellow damask, black velvet suit, bamboo-quilted petticoat, and even her French commode, and Macklin Head and Lapettes.
Wow, quite the list. These are fancy 18th century clothes, right?
Very much so. It shows her preoccupation with fashion and status. Beyond fashion, her letter is full of precise, if somewhat overbearing instructions about security at the hall. She even mentions leaving a blunderbuss and the great dog with the gardener and hind to protect the house.
Very security conscious.
And she sprinkles in a bit of local gossip about Mary Jones and updates on the farm animals, highlighting her domestic, if somewhat tyrannical, control over her household. It tells us she's a woman of strong will and precise expectations.
Next, we get a letter from Winifred Jenkins, the maid, and her prose is just delightful, famously full of malapropisms. For those unfamiliar, malapropisms are those wonderfully wrong uses of words, often sounding similar to the correct word, but completely changing the meaning, usually with humorous effect. What does she reveal through her unique voice?
Win Jenkins's letter to Mrs. Mary Jones is an absolute treasure, and you're right, her malapropisms are one of the novel's comedic highlights. Her distinctive voice, riddled with charming misspellings and misused words, immediately stands out, painting a picture of her character better than any direct description.
She sounds hilarious.
She really is. She sends her love to Molly and Saul, who he later gathers a beloved cat or pet, and quickly gets to the point. There's been a sad taking at Gloucester. She reveals, in her wonderfully garbled way, that Miss Liddy had liked to have run away with a player man and young master, and he would have done themselves a mischief, but the squire applied to the mayor, and they were bound over.
Applied to the mayor, oh dear.
Exactly. It's the very first, slightly confused hint of the romantic trouble Liddy has fallen into, setting the stage for the narrative's central romantic entanglement and giving us a sense of the immediate family chaos.
And finally, Jerry Melford, Liddy's brother, writes to Sir Watkin Phillips, giving us what sounds like the most direct and, frankly, amusing account of the family. What's his unfiltered perspective?
Jerry's letters are crucial for their candid, often cynical, and always witty observations, which act as a kind of detached commentary. He describes his Aunt Tabitha as a maiden of 45, exceedingly starched, vain, and ridiculous. A truly blunt assessment. His uncle, Matthew, is portrayed as an odd kind of humorist, always on the fret. And initially, Jerry finds him so unpleasant that he would rather resign all claim to the inheritance of his estate than keep his company.
Really? That bad?
Initially, yes. Yet Jerry paradoxically notes that all his servants and neighbors in the country are fond of him, even to a degree of enthusiasm. A contradiction that Jerry himself admits he can't quite comprehend yet, but which we as readers can already begin to piece together.
The hidden benevolence again.
Exactly. Jerry sees his family as a veritable family of originals, promising to describe them for his friends' amusement, which is essentially what Smollett does for us, the readers, through Jerry's discerning eyes.
So we have these initial wonderfully distinct snapshots of the family, and Jerry's letter on April 18th really details the Gloucester affair that Win Jenkins hinted at. What exactly happened with Liddy and this player man? It sounds like it was quite the scandal.
Liddy, having been cooped up in a boarding school, which Jerry describes as the worst kind of seminary that ever was contrived for young women, was incredibly innocent and crucially vulnerable.
Yeah, boarding schools could be like that.
Mr. Wilson, the player man, saw this vulnerability and exploited it, befriending her at the school and bribing her maid to deliver secret letters to Liddy. This preyed on Liddy's romantic sensibilities, fed by the sentimental novels she devoured, making her susceptible to his advances.
And this is where the narrative takes a surprising turn. How does Jerry find out, and what's his immediate, rather hot-headed reaction?
Well, Jerry, ever the astute, if sometimes rash, observer, had acquired so much credit with the maid through his own flirtations that when Wilson tried to send Liddy another letter, the maid, instead of delivering it, carried it directly to him.
Oh, wow. The maid betrayed Wilson.
Unintentionally, it seems, but yes. This revealed the entire plot to Jerry. Jerry, described by Matthew as a rash boy, immediately sought out Wilson and confronted him, treating him with insolence enough. A duel was imminent, with them priming their pistols. But thankfully, Matthew Bramble arrived just in time to prevent bloodshed.
Phew, close call.
Very. Matthew, in a display of his underlying moral rectitude, had to give his word and honor that they would prosecute the affair no further, and Wilson was discharged from the town. Following this dramatic confrontation, Liddy, first swooned away, then dissolving in a flood of tears, confessed everything, handing over the 3 incriminating letters she'd received.
Poor Liddy.
Matthew, fearing the dangerous connection and further scam, immediately carried her off the very next day to Bristol, hoping to escape the lingering shadow of this incident.
So they flee to Bristol Hotwell, but it seems Matthew's litany of complaints continues. It sounds like he's not finding much relief despite the change of scenery.
Yes. Not at all. In his letters from April 17th and 20th, Matthew continues his familiar tirade against his ailments, particularly the gout and the very air at Clifton Downs, which he dismisses as a demon of vapors that irritates his delicate constitution.
Always something bothering him.
Always. He dismisses the famous bathwater as nothing but a little salt and calcareous earth, showing his skepticism towards popular cures. He even finds Dr. Ellen's bizarre theories about stink and dropsy to be pure madness, an early glimpse into Smollett's satirical view of fashionable medical quackery.
Taking shots at the doctor.
Oh, yes. But despite his cantankerous nature, his underlying benevolence shines through again as he ensures Higgins, a notorious local poacher, won't be prosecuted for stealing a hare. It paints a more nuanced picture. A man who complains loudly about the world, but acts kindly towards individuals in need.
And Jerry, ever the insightful one, actually starts to understand his uncle better during their time in Bristol, peeling back the layers of Matthew's apparent gruffness.
Yes, this is a crucial development in Jerry's perception of his uncle. He observes that his uncle's disposition and value, which initially, like oil and vinegar, repelled one another, have now begun to mix.
Ah, so he's warming up to him.
He is. Jerry comes to the profound conclusion that Matthew's peevishness stems partly from bodily pain, the constant discomfort of his gout, and partly from an excess of mental sensibility, meaning he's deeply sensitive to injustice and human folly.
So it's not just grumpiness, it's sensitivity.
That's Jerry's conclusion. He notes that Matthew is timorous and fearful, but that he fears dishonor most. This is a crucial insight into Matthew's character. His outward gruffness and complaints are often a shield for a deeply sensitive, honorable man who is easily distressed by the imperfections of the world.
This understanding is deepened by a truly pivotal moment at Bristol, a genuine turning point in our understanding of Matthew's character. This is the incident revealing Matthew's hidden generosity. Tell us about it, because it completely reframes his initial portrayal.
This is a truly touching and revealing moment, and it completely subverts our initial assumptions about Matthew. Jerry initially observes his uncle with suspicion, suspecting him of frailty with a decent sort of woman, who appears with an emaciated, sickly child. He secretly observes Matthew giving her money.
So Jerry thinks it's something scandalous at first.
Exactly. But then Aunt Tabitha, ever the judgmental and avaricious figure, bursts in, condemning Matthew for his concupiscence or extravagance, and in a shockingly audacious move, she snatches the banknote, a full 20 pounds, from the woman's hand.
20 pounds? That was a lot of money, and she just grabs it.
Snatches it. The woman, however, quickly clarifies that it's an action that does honor to humanity, immediately revealing Matthew's pure, charitable intentions. Matthew's indignation was effectually roused by Tabitha's unfounded accusation and greed, and he thrusts her away.
Good for him.
We then learn the woman is the widow of an ensign, struggling on a meager pension to support her dying daughter, making Matthew's act even more profound. This incident unequivocally establishes Matthew's deep, concealed benevolence, contrasting sharply with Tabitha's avarice and judgmental nature, and it's a wonderful aha moment for Jerry. And for us, the readers, truly cementing Matthew as a character to admire despite his outward complaints.
So Matthew is revealed as much kinder than he initially appears, but Liddy's heart is still clearly troubled by Mr. Wilson, isn't it? Despite the family's best efforts, her feelings persist.
Yes, Liddy's emotional turmoil continues to simmer. In her letter of April 21st, she expresses almost intolerable disquiet over Mr. Wilson. She's tried to do the right thing, sending his picture away and promising to break correspondence, but she confesses that she finds it impossible to forget him.
Young love, hard to shake.
Very much so. She's clearly still very much in love, caught between her deep affection and her family's firm disapproval and their attempts to shield her. It highlights her youthful innocence and the powerful, perhaps misguided nature of her first love.
And just when you think Wilson is out of the picture, banished and forgotten, he makes a dramatic and truly theatrical reappearance. This is a moment that completely shifts the dynamic of Liddy's storyline. How does he manage this?
It's quite a scene, demonstrating Wilson's persistence and daring. Liddy writes that a Jew-looking man that plied at the wells with a box of spectacles had been observing her with unusual intensity.
The skies.
Apparently. This man later comes to their lodgings, and while Matthew is preoccupied trying on new glasses, the man whispers to Liddy, I am Wilson.
No way! Right under Matthew's nose.
Exactly. Liddy immediately recognizes his features, despite his rather flimsy disguise, and faints from shock. Her heart, as she puts it, assisted in the discovery. He claims he's no longer a player but a gentleman, promising to avow his passion without fear of social repercussions.
So he's claiming a change in status now.
He is. Winifred Jenkins, in her typical fashion, later comically misremembers his name and family details, highlighting her unique perspective and the lingering confusion about his true, perhaps still disguised, identity. This dramatic reveal shows Wilson's determination and Liddy's undying affection, setting the stage for future romantic complications that the family will undoubtedly struggle to control.
So they've dealt with one crisis then another, involving Liddy and this persistent Mr. Wilson. Now the family moves on to the famous resort town of Bath. How does Matthew, our resident misanthrope with very delicate sensibilities, react to this hub of society and perceived artificiality?
Matthew's disdain for Bath is immediate, vocal, and typically quite amusing, as detailed in his April 23rd letter. He finds it altered for the worse, criticizing its overwhelming parade, foppery, and extravagance.
He doesn't like fancy things.
Not at all. He even likens its strict etiquette and social hierarchy to that of a German elector, referring to the powerful, often overly formal and bureaucratic rulers of the Holy Roman Empire at the time. He rips into the architecture, finding the new grand buildings like the square and circus poorly designed, inconvenient, and even leading to health hazards from wet chairs and drafts, which trigger his gout.
Even the buildings annoy him.
Everything annoys him in Bath. To him, Bath embodies the luxury and corruption pervading English society, dismissing the fashionable mob as simply a monster of humanity. His senses are constantly assaulted by the noise, the crowds, and the general lack of refinement, and he finds little to enjoy.
But Liddy, of course, with her youthful enthusiasm and romantic leanings, has a completely different take, doesn't she? Her perspective is a stark contrast.
Yes, in stark contrast, Liddy, in her April 24th letter, finds Bath an earthly paradise. She marvels at the sumptuous palaces and enchanted castles of its architecture, seeing beauty where Matthew only sees structural flaws.
Polar opposites.
Completely. She delights in the vibrant mixture of highest quality and the lowest tradesfolk jostling each other at the pump room, finding it a fascinating spectacle rather than a repellent mob. She even gives a humorous account of the bathing process, particularly her Aunt Tabitha's comical attempt to bathe in a cherry-ribboned cap, with poor Win Jenkins assisting, looking like the ghost of some pale maiden from Fear.
Ah, Tabitha in a bathing cap. That's an image.
Liddy's innocent enthusiasm acts as a perfect foil to Matthew's cynical observations, highlighting how individual perspective shapes experience.
And Win Jenkins, with her unique vocabulary, offers her own amusing, albeit often confused, observations on Bath life. What stands out to her?
Winifred Jenkins, in her April 26th letter, continues to entertain with her delightful malapropisms and earnest misinterpretations of the fashionable world. She shares gossip about Wilson, amusingly referring to Jews with beards that were no Jews but handsome Christians, showing her confusion but also her keen interest in the drama.
She's got the gossip even if it's scrambled.
Oh, she does. She vividly describes being up to the sin in water during her bath, which caused a combustion, a comical, almost explosive physical reaction to the heat and commotion. She also begins to hint at Tabitha's romantic pursuits, particularly with a certain Sir Ulick Micligut, or McKilligut, and his supposed 1,500 a year, adding another layer of comedic tension to the family's dynamics.
Oh, Tabitha's husband hunting continues.
Relentlessly.
Matthew might be a grumbler, but he's also an astute observer of human nature, and he does find some unexpected company and entertainment in Bath, like famous actor Quinn. This seems to be one of his lucid intervals of good humor.
That's a good way to put it. Matthew's spleen is indeed often roused by the follies of others, and he often seems determined to be miserable. But he does have those delightful, lucid intervals of good humor where he finds genuine entertainment in observing human nature.
So he's not always miserable.
Not always. He finds Quinn, the renowned actor, to be a sensible man, and they develop a reciprocal regard, often recalling their old tavern adventures. Matthew's nephew Jerry even notes that when they are together, Quinn puts him in time. And like treble and bass in the same concert, they make excellent music together.
That's a lovely image.
It shows Matthew's capacity for genuine connection and camaraderie, despite his general misanthropy and grumbling tendencies.
Speaking of Matthew's extreme delicacy, he suffers quite a public affront at a Bath assembly, doesn't he? It seems even polite society can't escape his critical eye or his physical sensitivities.
His delicacy was hurt by a very public and rather shocking brawl between two Amazons, a term used for fierce, formidable women. Matthew initially assumes they're from purlieus of Puddledock, that's essentially the rougher, less reputable parts of London, indicating his immediate assumption of their low social standing.
He assumes they're low class.
Right. But later, to his chagrin, he learns that one was a baroness and the other a wealthy knight's dowager, highlighting the hypocrisy and underlying vulgarity Matthew perceives, even in polite society.
So even the upper crust can be rough.
In his view, absolutely. Even more dramatically, he faints at a ball on May 8th, utterly overcome by the stench of the crowd, which he calls a nauseous spittle, a term for a hospital for venereal diseases, underscoring his extreme revulsion.
He fainted from the smell. Wow.
He vows never to return, while Jerry, in contrast, is thankful for his coarseness of organs that allows him to withstand such assaults. Matthew's extreme sensory delicacy is a recurring and defining characteristic, driving much of his comedic complaints.
Jerry, meanwhile, is reconnecting with some old friends in Bath, offering a different perspective on life's challenges.
Yes, Jerry catches up with Rear Admiral Baldric, a colonel, and a baronet. They reflect on their shared experiences and misfortunes in life's lottery, a metaphor for the unpredictable nature of fate.
Life's lottery. Good phrase.
Despite the wreck of their constitutions from years of military service and life's hardships, their spirits and good humor triumph, and they even joke about their calamities. This offers a more nuanced look at camaraderie and resilience in the face of life's hardships, contrasting sharply with Matthew's solitary complaints and illustrating that even those who have suffered can find joy in connection.
But the real persistent source of amusement, and frequently vexation for the family, is Tabitha's ongoing, rather desperate quest for a husband. Jerry's particularly candid and quite scathing about her romantic pursuits.
Oh, Jerry's assessment of Tabitha's romantic life is brutal, yet undeniably humorous, painting a vivid picture of her character. In his May 10th letter, he describes her as rapacious and asserts that the perverseness of her nature keeps the family in disquiet and uproar.
Rapacious, strong word.
He believes she takes a diabolical enjoyment in being dreaded and detested, suggesting a rather twisted personality. He recounts her past failures. A futile attempt to marry a parson who flew off at a tangent when he realized the church living was promised elsewhere, and a naval lieutenant who was tragically killed in an engagement before they could marry.
So a string of bad luck or bad choices.
Maybe both. She even laid all her snares for Dr. Lewis, Matthew's trusted friend, feigning sickness to gain his sympathy, but the good doctor flatly rejected the proposal.
Dr. Lewis wasn't having it.
Not at all. The only object of her true, consistent affection, in an ironic twist, is her filthy cur from Newfoundland, Chowder, a relationship Jerry attributes to an instinctive sympathy between their rather peculiar dispositions. It really highlights the absurdity of her romantic aspirations set against her difficult personality.
This brings us to a significant and truly comical moment of dramatic revelation. Mr. Burton's unexpected proposal, which is not at all what Matthew expects, leading to pure confusion and hilarity.
This is indeed one of the most wonderfully farcical scenes in the novel. It begins subtly with Liddy receiving an etuis that's a small, decorative case for holding needles, scissors, or other small tools from Mr. Barton, an Oxford acquaintance of Jerry's, which immediately suggests he might be an admirer of Liddy.
Okay, so Matthew thinks it's about Liddy again.
Exactly. Matthew, in his Juneteenth letter, is immediately plunged again in a sea of vexation, expecting another romantic entanglement and scandal involving his niece. But then Tabitha, now a rather exaggerated professed Methodist to oppress Mr. Barton, dramatically brings him to Matthew's apartment for an audience.
Oh, Tabitha's putting on an act.
Big time. Barton then, to everyone's utter astonishment, proposes, but not to Liddy, but to Tabitha. He declares he's extremely ambitious of being allied to your family.
He proposes to Tabitha.
To Tabitha. Matthew is left gazing in silent astonishment, utterly confounded and speechless, having fully expected the proposal for Liddy. Barton, realizing his grave error in the most awkward way possible, hangs his head in awkward confusion and conveniently feigns a vertigo to escape the incredibly uncomfortable situation.
A sudden case of vertigo. Very convenient. So, what's the truth behind Barton's sudden, bizarre proposal to Tabitha? It sounds like there's a hilarious misunderstanding at the core of it.
The truth behind Barton's proposal is hilariously pragmatic and perfectly illustrates the vanity and self-delusion that often drive these characters. Barton was grievously misled by a mistake of at least £6,000 in the calculation of her fortune.
£6,000? That's a huge mistake.
Massive. He had been told Tabitha was much wealthier than she actually was. Once undeceived about Tabitha's true, far more modest wealth, he needed a way to gracefully, or rather disgracefully, exit the situation and annihilate the correspondence.
How did he manage that?
His chosen method: beating her beloved, perpetually annoying dog, Chowder, knowing this would guarantee Tabitha would refuse him admittance and end any further romantic pursuit.
He beat Chowder. That's low.
Absolutely. And indeed, he is promptly refused. But Tabitha, cunning as she is despite her foolishness, quickly appeases Derek, the master of ceremonies, who she had previously offended with her complaints, fearing he might retaliate by writing a satirical ballad or lampoon about her.
Damage control.
Exactly. She makes excuses, attributing her past behavior to the flutter of her spirits, and strategically subscribes handsomely for his poems. She even attempts to solicit reconciliation with Chowder, which the dog, of course, steadfastly declines, having a better sense of who his true friends are.
Even the dog holds a grudge. And what about Liddy's feelings in all of this? Even with these distractions, it seems Mr. Wilson is still very much on her mind.
Liddy, in a private confession to Matthew, reveals that Wilson did indeed come to Bristol disguised as a Jew peddler, confirming the earlier dramatic moment.
So it really was him.
It was. She admits that she still has deep feelings for him, but promises to cease correspondence only if it doesn't meet with her family's approval, a subtle hint that she might not be entirely committed to giving him up. Jerry, however, remains as incensed as ever against Wilson, now deeming him an imposter, and deeply worried about his family's honor being compromised by such a connection.
So Jerry's still not buying Wilson's story.
Not at all. This leaves Liddy's romantic future in a precarious, unresolved state, hanging in the balance as they prepare for the next leg of their unpredictable journey.
From the romantic entanglements and social absurdities of Bath, the family ventures to London. And naturally, Matthew Bramble, our quintessential misanthrope, has some rather scathing and often highly amusing observations about the sprawling metropolis. How does he see London?
Oh, Matthew's London letters from May 29th and June 2nd are quintessential Matthew. He describes London as an overgrown monster, a dropsical head, a body afflicted with disease indicating its bloated, unhealthy state.
A monster. Strong imagery.
He rails against the overwhelming overcrowding and pollution, declaring that snares are laid for our lives in everything we eat or drink, highlighting his constant anxiety about health and hygiene. He's disgusted by the pervasive luxury and corruption, observing tradesmen, clerks, and even waiters imitating the gentry, keeping equipages, that is, fancy carriages and multiple servants, which to him means no distinction or subordination left in society.
Society is falling apart, in his view.
Pretty much. He sees public diversions like Ranelagh and Vauxhall, popular pleasure gardens of the time, as nothing but noise, confusion, glare, and glitter, completely lacking true elegance. He even cynically connects the proprietors of these pleasure gardens to the faculty of physic and the company of undertakers, implying they profit from the ill health and moral decay caused by such frivolous pastimes.
That's pretty cynical, and his political and literary observations are just as blunt, aren't they? He's quite critical of the press of his day.
Yes, his critique extends to the political and intellectual spheres. He observes ministers like the Duke of N and other political figures finding a thriving spirit of defamation. He criticizes the liberty of the press when it descends into scurrility and abuse, going so far as to advocate for physical retribution against publishers of libels, even recounting anecdotes where this has supposedly happened.
Physical retribution, wow.
He finds authors jealous and afraid of one another, particularly criticizing a dogmatic writer who disparages all established and contemporary writers as dunces, pedants, plagiaries. Matthew is shocked to find a man have sublime ideas in his head and nothing but illiberal sentiments in his heart, revealing his deep disgust for intellectual arrogance devoid of genuine character. It's a biting commentary on the literary and political landscape of 18th century London.
Amidst all this urban chaos and Matthew's complaints, we get more gems from Wynne Jenkins, who is clearly overwhelmed by the sheer scale and strangeness of London. What stands out to her bewildered Welsh brain?
Wynne Jenkins's June 3rd letter is a glorious example of sensory overload filtered through her unique perspective. Her poor Welsh brain has been spinning like a top ever since I came hither.
Ah, I can imagine.
She describes the sights with her characteristic malapropisms, mentioning St. James's Palace, hilly fence, likely elephants, and piebald ass, a piebald or multicolored donkey. Her trip to the tower to see the wild beast is particularly amusing, as she describes a monstrous lion with teeth half a quarter long, and a gentleman's warning not to go near it if she wasn't a maid.
If she wasn't a maid, what does that even mean?
Who knows? It's pure Win Jenkins' confusion. Her visit to Ranelagh is equally bewildered, marveling at the flying of tailors, swinging and rolling of wheelbarrows upon a wire, God bless us, no thicker than a sewing thread, leading her to conclude they must deal with the devil. A wonderfully superstitious interpretation of acrobats.
Dealing with the devil, that's brilliant.
It's a delightful, if disoriented, glimpse of London through innocent, uncomprehending eyes.
And it's here that a fine gentleman tries to make an unwelcome advance on Wynne, and someone new steps in to defend her. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The true introduction of Humphry Clinker, our titular character. How does he enter the scene?
Indeed. A fine gentleman with a pig's tail, referring to a powdered wig style of the era, attempts to be rude to Wynne, but then, in a pivotal moment, my fellow servant, Humphry Clinker, intervenes. He tells the gentleman to be civil, and, in a moment of unexpected heroism, dusted his doublet, meaning he gave him a good beating with a good oaken sapling and carried Wynne home.
Humphry to the rescue. So this is our first real look at him in action.
Exactly. This is our first real introduction to Humphry Clinker as a character in action, a humble yet courageous figure. Matthew had just recently fired his previous insolent footman, John Thomas, creating the vacancy that Clinker will eventually fill.
So how did Humphry Clinker actually join the family's expedition? Because it wasn't a smooth start, was it? It involved a carriage accident and a rather desperate young man.
Not at all smooth. Jerry's letter from May 19th details what's known as the Marlborough Incident. While on the road, their coach overturns. Matthew, in a burst of frustration, kicks Chowder, Tabitha's pampered dog, further annoying her.
Poor Chowder keeps getting the short end of the stick.
He really does. The replacement postilion, that's the person who rides the lead horse of a carriage, provided is a shabby country fellow named Humphry Clinker. He's described as a love-begotten babe brought up in the workhouse, indicating his impoverished and parentless origins, and put out as an apprentice blacksmith. He appears sickly, famished, and ragged, with ne'er a shirt to his back, a truly pitiable figure.
So he's in a really bad state.
Truly wretched.
But Matthew, true to his concealed benevolence, shows him a surprising act of kindness despite his initial wretched appearance. This is a subtle yet significant moment for Matthew's character arc.
Yes, this is where Matthew's hidden compassionate side truly shines through again. After observing Clinker's wretched state, he surprisingly asks him if he's ashamed to ride without a shirt. When Clinker admits he is, Matthew responds with profound compassion, saying, "You stand convicted of sickness, hunger, wretchedness, and want."
Wow, that's quite a statement.
And without hesitation, he gives him a guinea to buy a shirt, a clear and tender sign of his underlying charitable nature, going beyond mere pity to offer practical, dignified help.
And then, just when Tabitha thinks she's rid of him, we get a truly pivotal moment that reveals Clinker's surprising loyalty and persistence. She tries to forbid him from joining them in London, but he reappears.
This is a truly pivotal moment that underscores Clinker's deep, almost spiritual, devotion and humility. Tabitha, disgusted by his appearance and apparent clumsiness, initially forbids Clinker to come to London, threatening to leave herself if he does. She sees him as nothing but a nuisance.
Tabitha's not impressed.
Not at all. But at Salt Hill, to everyone's astonishment, Clinker reappears, humbly adjusting the coach's footboard. He then kneels to Tabitha, offering a heartfelt plea. "To serve you on my bended knees, by night and by day, by land and by water, and all for the love and pleasure of serving such an excellent lady."
On bended knee, that's quite dramatic.
Incredibly humble. This profound humility and simple devotion has some effect on her, a tiny crack in her hardened exterior, allowing him to join their company. However, his awkwardness leads to immediate clumsiness. He spills custard on Tabitha and treads on Chowder, causing the dog to howl and a china dish to break.
Oh no, right after winning her over slightly.
Exactly. Tabitha, enraged, immediately demands his dismissal, issuing an ultimatum to Matthew. Part with that rascal or me?
And Matthew finally reaches his breaking point with Tabitha's tyranny. This seems to be the moment he truly asserts his authority and defends Humphry.
This is indeed where Matthew Bramble draws a definitive line in the sand. A genuine moment of triumph for his character. His eyes glisten and teeth chatter as he declares with firm resolve, "The question is whether I have spirit to shake off an intolerable yoke by one effort of resolution, or suffer myself to be ridden to death by a virago."
A virago. He calls her a virago.
He does. Tabitha, effectually humbled by his firm stand and the force of his anger, finally agrees that Clinker can indeed go to London, promising he shall never trouble you again. This scene is crucial. It not only establishes Matthew's long overdue authority within the household, but also firmly cements Clinker's place, albeit precariously, within the family's expedition. It shows Matthew's deep, protective loyalty to those he deems worthy.
Now, once in London, Clinker takes on a completely unexpected and rather public role, leading to a truly remarkable discovery. Humphry Clinker as a Methodist preacher, this must have been a shock to the Bramble family.
It's an absolute revelation and a peak comedic moment in the novel. Jerry's Juneteenth letter describes how he and Matthew stumble upon a Methodist meeting in a narrow lane behind Longacre, a rather humble and unexpected place for such an assembly.
Stumble upon it, just by chance.
Seems so. They squeeze in and are altogether confounded at finding all the females of our family among the audience. Lady Griskin, Mrs. Tabitha Bramble, Mrs. Winifred Jenkins, Liddy, and even Mr. Barton, all joining in psalmody with strong marks of devotion.
All the women are there. Even Tabitha.
And then, as if that weren't surprising enough, they discover the preacher is none other than the identical Humphry Clinker, exalted upon a stool with his hat in one hand and a paper in the other, in the act of holding forth to the people.
Clinker is the preacher, their new footman.
The very same.
Matthew must have been furious to find his new footman, a man he just hired, preaching sermons in public. What was his reaction, and how does Clinker defend himself?
He was initially quite furious. Matthew, angered by his lackey's presumption and the impropriety of a servant acting as a public orator, immediately orders Clinker down from his stool. But Clinker, with earnest conviction, defends himself, believing he is called upon by the Spirit to preach and to teach, stating that the new light of God's grace shine upon the poor and the ignorant. He genuinely believes he is doing God's work.
He thinks he's been called by God.
Sincerely believes it. Matthew, ever pragmatic despite his personal beliefs, dismisses this new light of grace as deceitful vapor, but remarkably softens his stance. He offers to take care of Clinker if he minds his work and stops preaching. What's even more surprising is Tabitha's softened view. Her burgeoning Methodism makes her surprisingly sympathetic.
Tabitha defends him, after wanting him fired.
Completely changes her tune. She now calls Clinker a sober, civilized fellow, very respectful and very industrious and a good Christian in the bargain, defending him fiercely against Matthew's initial outrage. This is a massive shift in her character and relationship with Humphry.
So, Clinker's religious influence is actually starting to change the family dynamics, particularly with the women, and even Matthew seems to be coming around.
Absolutely. We learn that Clinker, through his earnest conviction, has already brought over Mrs. Jenkins and the housemaid to Methodism, converting them to his fervent faith. Matthew, perhaps diverted by the thoughts of this scheme succeeding, and undoubtedly charmed by Clinker's loyalty and sincerity, decides to keep him on.
So he lets him stay, despite the preaching incident.
He does. He even goes so far as to offer to make Clinker his lifeguardman on the highway, providing him with pistols and a carbine. This is a significant shift in Matthew's trust and affection for Humphry, elevating him from a mere servant to a trusted protector, and showing that Matthew truly values genuine character and loyalty above social standing.
But Clinker's troubles, and perhaps his surprising rise, aren't over yet. He faces a graver accusation, leading to a dramatic moment of false accusation in his trial. What happens here, and how does Matthew react?
This is a serious turn of events that tests Matthew's newfound trust in Humphry, and it highlights a deeply flawed justice system. Matthew details in his June 12th letter how Humphry Clinker is suddenly seized by a thick, squat fellow, a postilion, who accuses him of robbing a gentleman on Blackheath on March 15th.
Accused of robbery. Clinker.
Yes. Matthew is immediately, instinctively, still persuaded he is innocent and commits declaring his name, even catching a dreadful cold in the process due to his diligent efforts. The justice system in London is then revealed to be deeply corrupt and complicit. Matthew learns that the accuser, the postilion, is actually the real highwayman, a man named Mr. Martin, who have been allowed to operate freely by Justice Buzzard, the thief-catcher general, in exchange for information and a share of the spoils.
The accuser is the real criminal, and the judge is in on it.
That's the accusation. Martin is known for his genteel behavior, only taking ready money and being able to disguise himself and his horse with remarkable ease, making him a slippery target.
And Clinker's pious influence even extends into the prison, creating some unexpected humor even there.
Yes, the turnkey at Clarewell Prison comically complains that Clinker has ruined his tap business, his little prison bar, with nothing but canting and praying among the prisoners, who are now getting drunk with nothing but your damned religion.
Getting drunk on religion. That's amazing.
It's quite humorous how Clinker's earnest piety disrupts the prison's established corrupt order, leading to a rather unconventional kind of rehabilitation. Ultimately, Mr. Meade, the gentleman who was actually robbed, verifies that Clinker is indeed not the highwayman, confirming Humphrey's innocence.
Though he's cleared.
Yes, honest Humphrey was discharged, expressing great eagerness and profound gratitude to Matthew for his unwavering support. This incident solidifies Clinker's moral standing in the family's eyes and further endears him to Matthew, proving his worth beyond mere service.
So, with Clinker's name cleared and his role in the family cemented, the family sets out northward for Yorkshire, beginning the next leg of their grand tour. And Humphrey, now equipped with pistols and a carbine, steps fully into his new, rather important role as Matthew's lifeguardman.
Exactly. Jerry's June 14th letter details their departure, painting a clear picture of their new traveling arrangements. Matthew, ever the head of the household, travels with the three women, Tabitha, Liddy, and Win Jenkins, in the coach, while Jerry and Clinker, now well-mounted with pistols and carbine, follow on horseback.
Humphrey's got an upgrade.
A significant one. It's a picturesque start to their next leg of the journey, with Humphrey now a visibly armed and trusted member of the expedition, ready to protect his benevolent master.
And it doesn't take long for Clinker's new role to be tested. They encounter highwaymen near Hatfield, bringing back a familiar villainous face.
Indeed. Near Hatfield, Clinker, with his newfound vigilance and equipment, spots two suspicious fellows. Jerry quickly confirms that these are the very same Mr. Martin, the highwayman who falsely accused Clinker, and his accomplice.
The same guy. Martin again.
The very same. Matthew and Clinker immediately prepare for a confrontation, and Matthew, showing surprising bravery that contradicts his usual timorousness, actually fires at them, though they manage to escape into the night.
Matthew fires a gun. Our nervous Matthew.
Yes. Matthew, after the initial shock and excitement, is the first to laugh at his own situation, a testament to his developing good humor and his growing comfort in these unpredictable adventures. This incident not only reinforces Clinker's loyalty and effectiveness, but also shows Matthew's surprising capacity for courage when those he cares for are threatened.
Their travels then take them to Squire Burdock's estate, a glimpse into rural gentry life, and Matthew is predictably not impressed with what he calls old English hospitality. It seems the reality doesn't live up to the nostalgic ideal.
Oh, Matthew's complaints continue, and here he critiques the very concept of Old English hospitality, claiming it's now merely a phrase, contrasting it unfavorably with the generosity he has observed abroad. He finds Burdock's house more like a great inn, rather than a welcoming private residence, with the host feeling misplaced within its own grandeur.
Not very homely, then.
Not according to Matthew. The squire himself is described as a vehement opponent of the ministry, proud of his opulent fortune, but little else. His lady is portrayed as very proud and prone to ungracious freedoms of speech, essentially a rude and unlikable woman without a single friend. Her husband hates her mortally, but generally truckles to her dominion, living in submission to her will.
Sounds like a miserable household.
And their son, recently returned from Italy, is dismissed as a tiddler and dilettante, a frivolous, trifling amateur who holds his parents in utter contempt. It's a rather bleak portrait of a prominent yet deeply dysfunctional family, and a commentary on the decay of social values.
And how are Tabitha and Liddy received by this formidable lady of the house? It sounds like there's a definite pecking order established right away.
The lady of the house immediately dismisses Liddy, calling her a fright, and condescendingly ordering her woman to fix her hair before dinner, showing her lack of warmth or genuine hospitality.
Calls Liddy a fright.
How rude, extremely. However, she doesn't dare irritate Tabitha, whose strong, formidable spirit she seems to immediately perceive and respect, or perhaps fear. The lady is also quite impertinent, directly asking Jerry about his fortune. When he states he'll have better than $2,000 a year, she dismisses it as paltry, a sum she deems insufficient to preserve his independence in their high-flying world.
$2,000 a year is paltry. Wow.
Matthew, nettled by her rudeness, points out her own father had less, but the squire retorts that times are changed, and his own table alone stands me in a cool $1,000 a quarter, highlighting the ostentatious, extravagant luxury that Matthew so despises and sees as a symptom of societal decline.
Next, they visit Harrogate, another famous spa town, and Matthew tries the hot baths there, with predictable and frankly comical results given his sensitivities.
Matthew's discomfort is a constant companion. Suffering from rheumatic symptoms, he is persuaded to try a hot bath. Predictably, he finds the smell unbearable, describing the bath area as the Pit of Acheron, a river of woe in the Greek underworld.
The Pit of Acheron. He doesn't hold back.
Never. He spends a sleepless night utterly unable to sweat, despite the heat, still feeling the insufferable effluvia from the bath. His delicate senses are once again completely overwhelmed, proving that no amount of supposed therapeutic water can soothe his perpetually irritated constitution.
And it's in Harrogate that we meet Mr. Micklewhimmen, the Scottish lawyer. Jerry plays a rather cruel but funny prank on him, leading to a truly revealing moment during a fire. This scene really strips away pretense.
Right. Matthew and Jerry encounter Mr. Micklewhimmen, an advocate, a Scottish lawyer, who feigns lameness and slyly uses a stomachic tincture that Jerry correctly suspects is actually claret, a fine red wine. To gain Tabitha's favor and perhaps a foothold in the family, he hypocritically professes Methodism. Jerry's prank involves slyly switching the labels on Micklewhimmen's claret and his own jalap, a strong purgative. This results in a poor clothier from Leeds who drinks most of it by mistake, suffering severe torments, an unfortunate side effect of Jerry's humor.
Oh, poor clothier. Jerry can be mean sometimes.
He can. The real revelation, however, comes during a chaotic fire alarm. Everyone leaps naked from their beds in terror. Micklewhimmen, forgetting all pretense of lameness and politeness, is seen running as nimbly as a buck, with a leathern portmanteau on his back, presumably containing valuable papers, pushing Tabitha down in his haste and shouting, "Nah, good faith, charity begins at hame." A Scottish proverb meaning one should look after oneself before helping others.
He pushed Tabitha down and ran off shouting, "Charity begins at home."
Exactly. He utterly sacrifices gallantry and any pretense of virtue for his own safety and the security of his valuables, exposing his true, self-serving nature.
But amidst this chaos, as pretense falls away, Humphry Clinker once again proves himself an unlikely hero, truly embodying genuine virtue.
Yes, Humphry Clinker, amidst the panic, shows incredible bravery and presence of mind. He selflessly saves the family by finding a ladder and helping them escape through Matthew's chamber window, risking his own life.
Clinker saves the day again.
He chivalrously receives Liddy in his arms, giving her his coat to protect her from the cold night air. Matthew later uses this incident to comment on how instinct and genuine character can often be superior to reason and superficial societal manners. Micklewhimmen, meanwhile, performs a comical Scotch dance in the aftermath, still desperately trying to regain Tabitha's good graces after his discretion during the fire, but it's clear his reputation is irrevocably sullied.
A comical Scotch dance isn't going to cut it after that performance. Their journey then continues to Scarborough, a picturesque coastal town. What are their impressions of this unique resort?
Scarborough is described with its historic castle, its bustling public rooms for social gatherings, and its truly unique bathing machines. These were ingenious wooden chambers on wheels, equipped with tilt screens for modesty, allowing bathers to enter the sea discreetly, protected from prying eyes.
Bathing machines on wheels, that's fascinating.
It's a detailed glimpse into the leisure and health practices of the period, offering a more refined, if still socially complex, alternative to the more rigid customs of Bath. It also offers a calmer setting for what is about to be a truly shocking revelation.
And it's in Scarborough that we get perhaps the most shocking and unexpected twist of the entire novel, the revelation of Ferdinand Count Fathom. This sounds like a huge connection back to Smollett's earlier, much darker and morally ambiguous work, completely tying his literary career together.
This is truly a full-circle moment for Smollett's readers, a masterstroke of narrative closure. The family is attacked by two highwaymen, causing chaos, and during the struggle, the Countess of Melville screams. A timely, almost miraculous intervention occurs when Grieve the apothecary happens to pass by and bravely brings one robber down with a crab stick.
Greed the apothecary saves them.
Yes. This leads to a dramatic reunion in Grieve's parlor. The Count rushes in, crying, "This is your goddaughter, my dear!" And Mrs. Grieve embraces the Countess, exclaiming, I am your poor Eleanor. This is my Seraphina Melvilla." They are revealed to be the Count and Countess of Melville, the generous, the glorious benefactors of Grieve's once unhappy parents.
Okay, so Grieve knows the Count and Countess. But wait.
The grand reveal is that Grieve is no other than Ferdinand Count Fathom, whose adventures were printed many years ago.
Count Fathom from the earlier novel. The villain.
The very same. This is a profound and direct connection between the Expedition of Humphry Clinker and one of Smollett's earlier, much darker and notoriously vicious novels. What makes this so impactful is the transformation. We learn that Fathom had changed his name, become a sincere convert to virtue, and dedicated himself to his daughter and self-improvement, choosing to forego the Count's generous allowance because he wanted to be worthy of it through his own efforts.
So Count Fathom redeemed himself, became a good guy.
That's the implication. This revelation underscores major themes of redemption: the possibility of moral transformation, and the power of sincere remorse, even for a character from such a notoriously dark past. It completely reframes how we might view Smollett's entire literary career, suggesting a final, hopeful vision of human nature that transcends his earlier cynicism, hinting that even the most flawed individuals can find genuine virtue and lead a meaningful life. It's a brilliant way to connect his past and present narratives.
What an incredible journey, full of mishaps, eccentric characters, and these truly surprising turns that really peel back the layers of human nature. As the Bramble family continues their journey northward, what can we expect for the future of these wonderfully drawn characters?
Well, the epistolary narrative structure, with its individual letters, leaves a lot open for our imagination, even as we know their physical journey continues north. We're left to ponder the ongoing developments in Liddy's romance with Wilson. Will their love survive the family's disapproval and Wilson's questionable past, which, as we've seen, he's determined to overcome?
Yeah, that's the big question for Liddy.
Then there's the fascinating evolution of Tabitha's character, particularly her softening towards Humphry Clinker and her ever-present, if often misguided, romantic pursuits.
Will Tabitha ever find a husband? Or maybe just mellow out?
Who knows? And of course, Matthew Bramble will undoubtedly continue his sharp, often hilarious observations on society, health, and human foibles, always with that underlying, often hidden benevolence that defines him. Their journey, much like life, is about constant adaptation and the revealing of true selves.
It's a story that, despite its outward comedic chaos and social satire, offers a lot to reflect on about what it means to be truly virtuous or truly flawed.
Indeed. The story presented in these letters, full of mishaps and eccentric characters, serves as a poignant reminder that even amidst life's grand expeditions and perceived chaos, true character, whether for good or ill, often reveals itself in the most unexpected and often humorous ways. It raises an important and timeless question for us to ponder. Does genuine virtue truly shine brightest when stripped bare and put to the test, as Humphry Clinker was? Or when it emerges from behind a disguise or a past reputation, as with Wilson, and most dramatically, Ferdinand Count Fathom?
That's a really interesting thought. Appearance versus reality, redemption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It challenges us to look beyond initial impressions and appearances to find the genuine article.
And there you have it. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us and this story. If you enjoyed it, a simple like or subscribe helps the channel out more than you know. Be good and take care.